Good morning, everyone. I know it's early today. I appreciate everyone coming in this morning. Today we're going to be taking the next hour and a half and going through the manufacturing capabilities within Dynamics AX 2012 R2 and some of the new capabilities coming out in the R3. The real focus of this session is around the traditional workloads within manufacturing. So we're not going to be going into heavy distribution capabilities around the transportation or warehouse management. We're going to stick to traditional manufacturing, production capabilities, demand planning capabilities, and even some of the product change management capabilities, as well as subcontracting. And we'll go into a little more of that in a moment. Right now, I'd like to first introduce the team that's going to be here. My name is Bill Moffitt. I'm on the Global Manufacturing Product Marketing team, and I have some esteemed colleagues here. They're going to be doing the majority of the demo here today, sort of a day-in-the-life type scenario from our R&D team in Copenhagen.
Good morning. My name is Konrad Volkmann. I'm the program management lead for the manufacturing teams in Copenhagen.
Yep. Hello, and my name is Christian Rødt. I also work out of the R&D team in Vedbæk in Denmark. I work as a program manager in the planning team there. And we'll share mics here. So,
yep. And my name is Johan Hoffmann. I'm a program manager too, working with Christian and Konrad out of Copenhagen.
That much of us switching later on, I promise.
Yeah, that'll be the last of us switching back and forth at this point. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started. We've got a lot to cover at this point. Oops. Okay. Looks like we jumped around a little bit. Okay. The topics we're going to cover, as I pointed out earlier, operations, control, and resource management. Those are the key areas that we're going to be creating a day-in-the-life type scenario. We're going to have a trip basically through with a production manager, starting off on the shop floor, identifying some issues that he sees out there, taking it back to the team as he goes through their review process to understand what in the world is going on the floor and how that impacts some of their planning needs from a forecasting and demand planning scenario. We're then going to go through the process of, once they've identified those issues, what are the issues? How do we fix that? How do we make changes to those production runs, to those routings and so on, to make sure that we can effectively manage those customer needs at that point in time? And then, how do we address those through individual production within the facility, or do we subcontract that out? And we'll go through a scenario today with that. Now, we're covering a lot of, like I said, in-house traditional production capabilities. During the convergence sessions here, we have, I think, over 13 different manufacturing specifically related type activities. These could be customization in mass processes. I think one of the sessions is going to be coming up next within a distributed supply chain. We'll also have how manufacturers can use the new warehouse management functionality, and several different sessions on each one of those areas that a manufacturer can really leverage. So I encourage you, look at your schedule, take advantage of this. Some of these dates and times may be a little bit off, so I would encourage you to come back and check that, but this is what we had as of our latest information. Okay. Now, before I jump straight into that day in the life, I want to make sure that you understand what Microsoft envisions for manufacturers. What do we consider is really a dynamic manufacturer? And it's really built on three specific pillars. The first pillar is that manufacturer is innovative. You know, from a long-term perspective, manufacturers can only survive if they're able to innovate and bring new products to market. So from that perspective, being able to understand what your customers, what your vendors, what your business partners, and your internal resources can provide and how they can adapt to address those needs out in the marketplace, that's going to be key to your long-term survival. So innovation is key. The second pillar that we want to focus on is being able to be agile and responsive, being able to go out there and address critical business needs out there in the market, and as they change, whether it's regulations, whether it's new demands, new customer opportunities out there, how you as a manufacturer can effectively address those changes through agility is going to be key to your long-term success. And finally, the most important resource that you have within your organization is your people. And what we found is being able to take those resources and leverage the knowledge they bring to the table, the experience they have, and it's around a broad, diverse age range group as well. Many of you have baby boomers, older generation, more senior people in your organization. And being able to take advantage of that experience, while at the same time they may not have access and a familiarization around the high-tech IT tools, maybe they're not used to this computer generation like the younger generation is, but being able to create a user interface, a tool set that they can leverage to get the most out of them is going to really be key to you as a manufacturer succeeding. And that's where we feel that Microsoft Dynamics AX and our entire Microsoft Dynamics platform is really going to allow you to succeed, to be able to get the most out of your people, to allow you to succeed in the marketplace. So as I mentioned, we are going to go through a bit of a day in the life, and that covers a lot of different aspects. It's going to start out on the shop floor. We're going to identify some issues. Each one of these areas, these blocks that we've got up here, we're going to create a different little demo scenario around. So we'll be transitioning between Conrad and Christian and Johan back and forth through these scenarios. So we're going to go through that day in the life, identify the issues, show how we go about fixing those issues, and then work our way through the process until we get to the end of the day, and then the cycle starts over with the next day. So without further ado, Conrad, here's the mic.
Thank you, Bill. So I'd like you to meet Tony. Tony is our production manager, and what you see here actually is Tony is the model production manager that we use in our development scenarios actually to develop scenarios towards the specific needs of the specific personas in manufacturing and overall the enterprise. So Tony is the type of guy who needs to make sure we get optimal throughput from our production staff. And he works with a small team. So let's join Tony through a day in his life where he basically comes to the office, checks his mails, checks his key performance indicators, has a coffee, and that is where he meets his team. So Tony's team is Eduardo, the production planner, Oscar, the process engineer, and finally Lars, the shop floor supervisor. So they meet at Tony's office to take their daily tour to the shop floor. So the team goes down to the shop floor, and at the shop floor they're going to meet Shannon, the machine operator, and Ahmed, the water spider. And with that, we're going to actually go into some demos that Johan is going to take us. So on the shop floor tour, they actually look at some job status and some attendance status that Lars will actually give them.
Thank you, Conrad. So I'm now playing the role of Lars, who is the shop floor supervisor. He's responsible for a team on the shop floor. And one of the first things that Lars will do when he meets in the morning is look at the job status and the attendance status of the people who works in his department. So I'm now going to switch to the AX application. Okay, so I'm going to open a form called attendance, and it's then selecting for this group where the group he's responsible for. And here it has an overview of the people who works in his team. And for the first employee, Tony, he can actually see that he's not met in today because he's on a vacation. So he's on a week vacation. You can see that there are 3 people who clocked in this morning at around 7 o'clock, 7:04, 3, 2. And that is their official clock-in time. If they were clocking in later, they will have to provide like a reason code for coming in late, and then he will also be able to see why they were looked in, they clocked in late this morning. What you can also see from this form is actually that Lars, he clocked in at 7:04 this morning, and he already started working on 2 jobs, and that can be seen below in this form. You can also see that these workers, they are working on the day shift. When we have the night shift, then you can also see workers clocking in here. So that is his first task, is just to see who met in this morning. Then he also wants to see an overview of the job that is going on in the department. And here he has a job list. And then he can select a resource, and the resource is kind of representing the work cell where he is responsible. And here we have all the jobs that are going on in his work cell. And these jobs, they have a status. The first one is completed, 3 are in progress. And you can also see which persons who are working on these jobs. The first job here, we actually have 2 employees working on the same job. And 1 employee is actually working on 2 different jobs at the same time. He can manage more jobs at the same time. You can also see the progress of these jobs, how many has been reported on each job, and what is the delivery day of the jobs. So if some of the jobs are late, he can put a priority on these jobs, and then they will appear in the job list when the employees they start the jobs from a job form, and then they can see that this is a high priority job. From this form, he can also sequence the jobs, and if he wants to look at capacity on this work center, he also have a possibility to open a form where he can see the capacity load. This is for a higher period of time, but then he can also adjust so he can see it for a week or for 1 day. So with that first task, now Lars has an overview of who met in this morning and which job are going on, what are the statuses of the job. So with that, I'll switch to Conrad, who will talk about a Kaizen event.
So the next step on the shop floor tour is that they're actually holding a Kaizen event. They actually, together with Shannon and Ahmed, they review the latest production days. So this is where Shannon reports quality issues for a certain product that have occurred. And finally, Ahmed suggests that we should actually change the quantity per box for component B01 from 50 to 30. So to actually remember that and note that in the system, Oscar is going in and actually create a case for Eduardo to remember to do this. So he's actually starting with the product. So he's looking into his product B1 and looking at the actual plan, default order settings, where you can see he actually has the actual order settings for inventory are on 50. So we want Eduardo to change that. Oscar is not allowed to change that himself. So instead of actually doing that change, he will create a new case. And I've configured a case category that is called Kaizen. And I will associate that to Eduardo. So now we have the reminder for Eduardo to actually come back and change the settings for that item. So the next tour on the shop floor tour will be a lean work cell. So we're now going to meet a lean work cell and see what the status review in the lean work cell looks like.
Yes, thank you, Conrad. So now Lars has moved from his office down to the shop floor, and he's going to the lean work cell. And I'm going to open the lean scheduling board, or the Kanban scheduling board. And in the Kanban scheduling board, you can see what is going on this lean work cell. The scheduling board is divided here in days, and we have today, Wednesday, where we have a lot of Kanbans that are planned, not yet executed. If we look at the day before Tuesday, you can see the Kanbans, most of them have some small marks. So these are actually Kanbans that has been completed. Some of them didn't make it for yesterday, so they are kind of remainders. They have to be executed. So here's a task for Lars to get these Kanbans planned, and of course you use the schedule board to do that. You can also see that the Kanbans, they have different colors, and they represent different product families, and there might be a requirement to run the Kanbans color by color. And so that is also a way to help Lars schedule the Kanbans. If you want to have an overview of what has been going on in the past and what is going to happen in the future, he has these arrow buttons. So here he can drill to the past, and we can also look in the days ahead. If he doesn't want to click so much, he actually also have this view button or select a specific date, and then he can look at these dates. No Kanban has been planned for this period, but you can see already on Tuesday 11th, you have some Kanbans lying there. So I'm going to select today to get back to today. You can also see if there are any unplanned. We have 3 unplanned Kanbans here, and you can actually drag them to the Kanban board. Sorry. And you can select more, or only one or more, and then it will be planned on this day. And you can see this little watch is indicating that it's actually delayed. So we have these unplanned Kanbans or unexecuted Kanbans. They are planned. They didn't make it yesterday, so we will try to reschedule these. So I select them, and then I drag them to Tuesday. But as you can see, these are actually also provided with a little watch saying, if you're going to execute them on Thursday, you are going to be delayed. And we don't want to disappoint our customers. So let's try to see if we can put them on today. And we can, but as you can see here, we have 250 pieces. That represents the capacity of the day. That is how much we can do in the work cell. And now we actually have planned 270 pieces. So that means that the people working in this work cell, they have to run faster. So he has to persuade his people to do that in order to keep the customers happy. So this is the way he can work in the Kanban schedule board. It's a very effective tool. You can see it's very easy to plan and get an overview of what's going on. To get a more detailed overview, we can look at the cycle time history of the production flow. And just to give you an idea of the overview you can get. So this is for a period of time where you get some aggregated numbers of what is the actual cycle time, and then what is the average cycle time. So this is what we plan to do, and this is what we actually did. So you can see on this day we actually did a little bit better than what was planned. So here you can see the performance of the work cell for a period of time. So having said that, I'll give it over to Christian. Oh, sorry, for Conrad. For forecasting.
So after the shop floor tour, Eduardo and Tony meet Kevin to actually discuss the next season forecast. So Kevin has worked with his team. Kevin is a sales manager. He has worked with the team to actually enter the forecast for the next season. And Eduardo has run the first plans against that forecast. So Kevin and Eduardo will now explain the forecast and how it actually shows in the system and how it gives the team information what needs to be done.
Yep. So thank you, Conrad. So now that we are looking at the forecast here, the team would like to understand what is the actual forecast. They would like to understand how does that influence our schedule for that. And if we have any issues, what can we do about it? So let's dive into AX and have a look at that. Let's start out by looking at the forecasts. So I will go to the demand forecast for A01. You can see here that in March we have a forecast for 90 pieces, and the allocation is split out with 90 pieces for each day in this period. So this is a fairly simple forecast we have on this one, 90 per day. Let's take the other item down here. Here you can see that we have two forecasts. One is starting here in March, and the other one is starting up in April. So the first one for 30 pieces each day indicates like this is our general forecast. Then we have a seasonal peak in April where we want to boost the forecast a bit, so we can put that in as a separate line to keep it separated, indicating this is a seasonal fluctuation. So for A03, we have two forecasts, you could say, summing up in the end to 70 pieces per day. So with that, let's go and take a look at the schedule. So I'll go to planning, and I'll look at the supply schedule. Here I will open it for the item allocation key that we're using for these type of items. All the items with 4 zeros and an A. And let's take a look at the dynamic plan. And we want to view it in weeks. When we view it, we could have set it up with many different views. You could say that you want to see each day in the beginning, then you want to see weeks, and then further out months or just the rest, so you can fit it all on your screen. For this one, I'm just showing weeks. So now we're looking at the scheduling board. So what you're seeing here is all the figures from the backlog and for the next couple of weeks here. You can see here the period start inventory. You'll notice here that it's going negative, so we will get back to that. Something seems to be wrong for this item here. Below that, you see the demand for each of the periods. You can see that we have the forecast here, which is growing later on when we have the additional forecast. You can also see here where we have a sales order in week 11, that the remaining forecast has been reduced by the 10 from the actual sale. So if you start out with a forecast of 100 and you already sold 10 in that period, you will have 90 remaining for the forecast. Then we can see all the supply we have. In this case, we have some production orders. Below that, we have the net sum of the supply and the inventory, and you can see the pegged. Well, let's take a look at all the negative numbers here. I can view that graphically down here. So you can see it's actually not looking that good because this is 0 and it's just going negative. Something is obviously wrong here. It seems like we cannot deliver to our customer what our forecast is expecting. So let's dive into that. So if we look at the production here, here. If we look at the production orders here, we can take the first one here and look at the capacities that we have here. You can see that for each of the productions here, we need a machine, a person, and a tool. And being the planner here, I know that the machine tends to be our bottleneck. So let's have a look at its load. So I will go here, open the resource, and I will view the capacity load. In here, I can choose how I want to see it, for which plan I want to see it. For now, let's say that I want to see it for the next 3 months. I want to see what's going on for a longer period. So I see it from today and until June. On the graphics, I can choose to see it in weeks again. I could also choose a different setup. I'll apply that, and you can see it pops up here. So you can actually see that this week is okay, but from then on, it's just fully booked. It's actually not even okay because 100% is down here for this one. So it's really, really overloaded. We need to do something about that. One thing we know we can do, we have a very good vendor out in town who have been doing subcontracting for us early on. So with this information, I will hand it over to Conrad to see what we can do about getting a subcontractor on this.
So what the visual shows us is that we actually, in spite of having everything fully loaded, all resources, all key resources fully loaded, we're actually going negative in supply. That basically means as we run the master scheduling with finite capacity here, it would basically go negative in supply on all periods where we cannot actually have enough supply to meet the demand. So the conclusion of the team is that they will actually ask the subcontractor to step in and take over a couple of their production volumes. So to do that, we're not making it immediately effective. So again, Tony would this time go in and create a new case for Oscar to work on to actually evaluate. So I'm again going back to the product. I'm creating that case from the product perspective. And I'm actually taking this finished product A4 that is part of the product family as well. I said I want to create a new case for this one. For this type of change, we actually have an own case category created. It's a subcontracted process change. You can create case categories on your own demand, as you can see, and these case categories are configured in a different way. So different process templates actually apply to for whatever process, whatever case you will actually go and select. So by default, this case category is actually assigned to Oscar. So what Oscar needs to do next is basically, he needs to configure the system, but basically he needs to kind of create a new BOM and a route to support the supply from the subcontractor. For this, he needs additional base data. He needs to set up, if you want to implement subcontracting for production orders in AX, you need usually you would actually create a warehouse and a location that you would assign to the vendor, where you actually would model this is where the inventory of the vendor that you have moved to the vendor actually sits. A resource group that is representing the vendor location, and also a resource representing the vendor labor contribution. And finally, what you need is a service product used in procurement, and that is something that is a service type item, and we're using for that an inventory service type item, basically because that is actually also used for the planning. So Oscar is going through this case and basically starts that case. You can see the associated case here. So I'm actually putting the case in process. Oh, I have to switch. Sorry. I have changed the status of the case in process, and I'm also looking into the case process. And you can see that there's actually a case process created that consists of three major steps, which is, first step would be create BOM and route, review the cost and review the BOM route with the vendor. Then we have a second and a third stage that do not have activities created at that point in time. So I will start with actually going into the item. Going into the engineer. And I want to create a new, so you can see that this consists of two items here. And I'm going to create a new BOM. I actually could have copied that. So this BOM consists of three lines now. So this is my service item actually. So you can see this is the service item that has a storage dimension. That was the wrong thing. The item model group for the service it's a stock product, but it is actually a type service. Before I'm actually leaving this form, I'm not activating that BOM now, but I'm actually associating it to the actual case. Oh, I actually have to select an active one. That is my new subcontracting case. With that, I'm actually done with the BOM. So in my case process, if I actually go through the first step now, I can do that, go through the activities. New activities. I can now set the first activity as complete. Oh, sorry. I closed. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm creating an associated route. So I'm going to back to my case. You can see that so far what is associated to the case is the item. The vendor, that was actually the wrong case, I guess. Yes. Okay, it's the item, it's the product, and it is the BOM and formula. Going back to the item, into the route. Create a new route. For the route, the site is mandatory. And I would basically create one operation here. And I have a specific resource requirement for this one. I have to fill in the route group, of course. In this case, I would actually have a resource requirement of a specific resource group. And this is the resource group subcontractor 4102. And in this resource group, we have an actual vendor resource, which is the SO1. The other important thing is that the route type actually that we have here is vendor. Again, I'm doing the same. I'm actually associating this new route with our actual case, and that the route has been created. So before he's actually closing that part, Oscar will now go into, and he will run a calculation of what planned cost actually would occur if he would use this BOM and route. Sorry, I have to delete. So I'm running a calculation, costing version planned, and I did not activate this yet. But I'm going to use the subcontracted route there and also the subcontracted BOM and run a calculation. So now the case is actually ready for Ken to review. So Ken would basically go into the price and look at the calculation breakdown. Sorry, this was the pending price, the cost price, calculation breakdown. Wrong one, complete. And see that this is the material and this is the resource, and that is actually the cost that's going to be effective out of the new setup. So with that, Ken can actually go in and approve that step. Ken can actually find this in this work items that is the wrong one. It's the work items in general that we need to look at here. All activities, if I'm searching for Ken. Responsibility. You can see that he actually has this task to review the cost on this case. And when he has done that, he just sets this to complete. So Oscar has created the BOM and the route for the subcontracting case, created the cost calculation, and Ken has had as his next step, had his work task, his activity to actually review that and approve that, and by completing that task, he would actually signal that he has approved that cost. So the next thing would be that after that, now that Oscar has worked on preparing everything, they meet with the vendor. Oscar has sent the BOM and route to the vendor, so they actually agree on that this is actually the right thing, that it is matching the business case, and they also negotiate the price. So Oscar gives last instructions to the vendor what the quote must contain, so that later on the purchase account manager can actually create the purchase agreement. So with that, Oscar can now go in and approve the BOMs and routes. And this is something, that is especially available now for this category of product change case, where we actually have an approval support. So I'm not going to go into the system and go into the form BOM and route forms as it was in the older versions, but I'm doing this whole approval process. This is now supported from the case. So I'm opening the approve part, and you can see that from the case, I actually have the BOM and the route that is associated. I'm multi-selecting that. So up here, you see the BOM and the route that apply to the case. Down here, you see the versions that are related to and are created to that. I can select a specific day and say, when is it actually going to be effective? And let's see, so okay, we agree that is something that might be effective from next week on. And now I can put in the suggest actions, and it will suggest me actions for all the entities that are in that case. And this is only a simple scenario. So if you have a change case that would have, where we could actually have dozens of BOMs and dozens of routes, or hundreds of BOMs and routes associated to one case. So with one user activity, you can actually do the whole approve and activate in one run. But I would actually not do the activate, because activate for the versions, because activate in AX means this is the new default version, and that's not what I want. Because our actual goal is that we will have BOM and route for subcontracting as an alternative to the actual in-house production. So we will actually have both in the future. So I'm going to set this action to approve only. And now I'm just going in and say apply the actions, select the approver, and with that, I'm done. Now these BOMs and routes are approved, and we're ready to produce. Only remaining thing, of course, I want to go in and view my activities. And I said, okay, review BOM and route has been done. So I'm actually setting this as complete as well. Going back to my case. Open here This. Creating the stage. If I'm changing the stage, you can see that this next stage activities will be created. So I'm going to these activities now and set them as complete. There's still one left, and that is something that's actually left for Eduardo, because he still needs to actually go in and update the master plan. So I'm going to leave that, assign that to Eduardo. And that is where Oscar has done his work. So now, Eduardo is going to take over.
Yep. Great, thank you, Conrad. So now Eduardo, he thinks back, he remembers, oh, I had to update some numbers on an item, and we have to do something about the shortage, where we now have all the setup we need to do the subcontracting. So let's take a look at that. So first, you can see here that I actually, Conrad, he was kind enough to lead me on my case here, or the activity. If I open that, you can see that I have the associated case down here. Let's see if we can have another one. So we didn't actually assign an item to this one, so I'll just go in manually and update it here. We could have assigned it to the case, but let me go here to the release product, and I think I have to go through I'll take this one here, and I will just go for the default order settings. And in here we have the wrong numbers. We wanted this to be 30 instead for all of them. So multiple by 30, we don't want to order less than 30. We want the maximum bumped up all the way to 800. And we want the standard order quantity to be 30 in here. So now I have actually updated the item. I can go back to my case here. I think it was the one we have here. Nope, that was Conrad. We have a lot of cases open by now. So this one, still the wrong one. Okay, but basically I completed the case here, and I can go and see it from here. Filter on my cases here. You can see I have the change minimum order setting here. So I can go in and say that now we are done with it. Before I do that, I can open the activity and check this one is completed. I'll do that. Now the other thing we had to do was to do something about our inventory just going down, 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 because we didn't have enough capacity. Now that we have the subcontractor all set up, we can go and take a look at that. So let me jump to planning here. And I will go into the supply schedule. And we will take the same one again, the item allocation key. I will use the dynamic plan and the weeks view. So now you're seeing what we were seeing before as well. Now what we want to do, we want to go in from here and create a production order for our subcontractor. So let me show you how you can do that. So now I'm just placing it on the week. I say I want to create a new production order, and I want to do it for the item where we have the issue. It's this one here. And you can see basically, if we take week 10, I'm missing 145. So let's make it 145 pieces here. And no, I don't want to insert that. I will overrule it for this one here. So then I have to go in. It's important that I go in now and choose the subcontracting bill of material and the subcontracting route. If I don't do this, it will not be sent out to my subcontractor. It will still try to create a production order that we do in-house. And I will just choose a location as well here. So with that, I can create the production order. So now we have the production order sent to our subcontractor, and we will be better off tomorrow, hopefully. So with that, I will hand it over to Conrad again.
So now the schedule is updated. So the next thing that actually happens in that production facility is that there's an alert. So what happens is that there's actually a tool that's broken. We actually heard of that in the Kaizen event already, that there was some quality problems, and now finally the tool broke, so we actually have to do something about that. So as it is, it takes some time to get the tool, a new tool from the vendor. That basically means we need to now go into and reschedule our production. And we also need to make sure that the system understands that for 2 days, we will not have this tool available, and that we will need to reschedule the production orders that are actually associated to that. So we start actually with that Lars is going in and documents the resource.
For today on this resource, which are the jobs that are taking capacity on this resource. And as Conrad he told me, it's actually 2 days that it will take to get a new tool from our vendor. So I have to adjust the capacity to 0 for these 2 days, and then I have these 2 jobs that I need to replan. So it's 43 and 44. And I can also look for the day after. Here I have a whole lot of other jobs that I need to replan. I'll only do it for 1 day for the sake of our time here. So first thing I will do is adjust the capacity. And then we have a calendar deviation functionality. And we have this 24-hour calendar. It's running in 3 shifts. So I can actually go and switch the calendar. And I here have a calendar we call blocked, and this calendar is set up so it contains 0 capacity or 0 hours, so we'll have 0 capacity for this day. And that should be reflected in my capacity load, as you can see here, that I now have 0 capacity. I still have these 2 jobs hanging, so I need to reschedule these jobs. So I'll go to my production orders. And then I can find 43. But I could, hang on. So I have the 2 production orders here, and you can see they have the status of scheduled. And then I'll just go and reschedule them. And I selected both. And then I have a scheduling direction. So it could be backwards from scheduling date. I could determine whether I want to plan with finite capacity or infinite capacity. If I do that, I risk overbooking my resources. I might want to do that because if I have a fixed appointment with my customer, again, we need to work longer hours in order to reach the deadline. So let's see, I run these with unlimited capacity, and then I just reschedule. So now I have rescheduled these 2 resources, and that should be reflected in the supply schedule. So I go to my master planning and just find the supply schedule, and we look at the product family. So I can see I have some adjustments in my production orders. So what we want to say here is that the supply schedule is immediately updated when I start replanning. So my master planning result, that is why we call it a dynamic plan. It is immediately updated when we make changes in our scheduling and production. With that said, I'll give it over to Christian.
Yep. Thank you, Johan. So now that Johan he was kind enough to open up the scheduling here, I want to go in right away and make sure that we actually find the sales orders that will be affected by this broken tool. When I have done that, I will create a case so that our salespeople, they can actually go out and notify our customers about the unfortunate situation. So now here from the supply schedule, you can see that I have some sales orders over here on Tuesday. I can go in and expand the sales orders. I can see it's concerning this one here. Let's go ahead and open it. Okay, so we have a sales order for Sparrow Wholesales, and we need to inform them about the situation. So for that, I will create a case for it. I'll go to General, under Cases, and create a new case. Under the category, we have a sales category called Delay. I'll choose that one here, and I will say inform.
the agreement is set up, and it's actually associated to the case as well. And then that was the wrong one. So I will then go ahead and finalize the case by going to the activities and complete the modify of the purchase order. And then open it, go into the last step of it. So we'll change the stage again. Oh, we didn't actually click off the process from Eduardo. Should have done that. That is still in process. So you can see I cannot actually close the stage while I'm actually, I have open work to do. And I'm going to the last stage now. And it created me a final activity to review and close the case. So with that, we're kind of at the end of the working day. The only thing that is left to be done is that Tony has to close his working day. So he's going to close the product change case. So I'm going to do the last step here, which is basically go in, complete the activity. That is wrong. Set as complete. Go back to the case. So what he can do actually is through the case log he can see all the details that actually have been done. You notice that with all the steps that we could do, we can actually add logs to the case, so you can actually see that a trace of what has been done. The approval and activation would automatically do a detailed log of what has been approved and activated according to this case. And before I can actually close it, I have a completeness check. And this completeness check is something that actually can be configured. So you can configure the severity of these checks and say whether of these checks are actually warnings or errors before you're allowed to actually close the case. So with that, when I close the case, it mandatorily runs this check. So with that, we're coming actually to the end of the day that we have actually followed Tony in different operations. Tony and his team was heavily involved in working on operations control, resource management, did actually forecasting, showed how the forecasting shows up into the into the availability and what kind of actions are derived from that. We have built this scenario very much around the case management because we want to actually to showcase a little bit how case management can be used to collect the events that you have in manufacturing and actually track what's going on, track what has to be changed, track what master data has to be updated and in daily life. And finally, showcasing subcontracting as an alternative and as an important tool actually to support your daily manufacturing activities. It all kind of burns down to the concept and to the target of agile manufacturing, where it's about produce what the customer needs when he needs it. So yeah, with this, we would like to open it up for your questions. If you have questions according to this, relative to the scenario or relative to site scenarios.
I realize this is a blended session with R2 and R3 features. Could you just enumerate the R3 features that you leveraged in this demo?
So in R3 is basically what is really new is most of the case management is something that has been recently created and introduced. Basically the whole scenario around product change cases with the integrated checks that you actually can do approval and activation from a case perspective. We have shown in the Kanban board there were a couple of new abilities to control, especially the date control. We didn't actually show the move to date, but it's much more efficient now how you actually model the dates and actually with more capabilities in that as well.
And maybe it's worth mentioning, we just looked briefly at forecasting. And tomorrow in this room at 2 p.m. there is a session about demand forecasting, which is a brand new R3 feature that will be demoed throughout an hour there. We'll get into the details of how we could use the historical demand to generate a baseline forecast that we can modify in Excel and get it back into AX. So that's 2 o'clock in this room tomorrow.
The other part that we did not show, which is really new in R3, of course, is the integration, how production is integrated with WMS. There's a special session to that. Yeah. When is that?
Yeah, so at 2 o'clock we have a session for wax and production integration, where we are going to show scenarios around lean, how we pick materials for Kanbans and how we report them, and also for production and batch orders.
I think we have one more question.
Yes, in your example with working with the vendor, what happens if raw materials need to be sent to the vendor? How do you handle all these inventory transactions of moving the raw materials to the vendor and get back the finished product from the vendor to our plants?
That's a very good question. So effectively, as I told in the beginning, we're usually modeling the vendor as an own warehouse. So the vendor gets a vendor-managed warehouse associated, and that means that through our supply policies, basically through the item coverage settings, you can define how that warehouse is replenished. But when the production order is created, it will actually take in the warehouse that is associated to that resource group as the material warehouse that said, this is where I need it. When I'm creating production order and I'm estimating that, it would say, okay, here at that warehouse I have this much need of material because it's actually operated in that resource group. And now master scheduling knows that how to fulfill at that warehouse, so you will basically enable the warehouse level as a coverage dimension, and then now master scheduling can figure out, is this a direct purchase? Are we going to purchase it directly to the vendor? Then you would create a purchase order at for that warehouse. Is it a transfer order? It would be a transfer order. Or you could, in a regular manufacturing scenario, you could also create a Kanban rule to replenish the vendor with withdrawal Kanbans, fixed quantity, or event Kanbans to pull the material to the vendor whenever you need it.
Is there any difference if the vendor is a sister company?
No, not really, because I mean, this is it is actually not fully supported. I mean, we don't really, we would not create the order or the production order in an intercompany process. Basically, if in the subcontracting process in manufacturing, the vendor can be, of course, a sister company. If it's an intercompany case, it would basically create the purchase order and the sales order for the service, and that is how the sister company would know. So the collaboration with the vendor would be through the service, and basically kind of calling off the service from the vendor.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've got a quick question about your example with the broken tool. The steps that you took involved rescheduling a bunch of production orders, creating a new case to notify the salespeople that they needed to talk to their customers. To me, it seems like a lot of extra steps to say that I'm going to knock the resource down to having no capacity. I'm then going to manually reschedule orders. I'm then going to create a case, and someone else is going to have to notify somebody. Is there a way, I know it probably doesn't exist today, is there a way to kind of automate that? If I'm going to set a resource to have 0 capacity today and it's got scheduled orders, should the system not be able to then say, I'm going to automatically reschedule those orders, create a case that's going to automatically notify the people?
It's a very good suggestion. So basically what we would need to do for that is that we would need a configuration that says if you have certain action message, create a case relative to the action message right away. It's exactly what I was thinking when I was looking at the scenario. That is kind of a missing piece that we could either automatically or manually go through the action messages and say, okay, create the case to inform, because that is, now we actually have the evidence that this is not going to be fulfilled. So it's a very good suggestion, and I hope we'll be able to do that very soon.
Thank you.
Over here. Conrad?
Yes?
I have a question. First of all, ditto to that gentleman's suggestion, because that's exactly what we were seeing, was a lot of convoluted steps taking up a lot of time, which would never happen in our industry or in our factory. What we do to kind of answer your question is we take a work order that may be issued to the shop floor. We can substitute at the work order level with a new BOM and a new route and quickly do it. We do it within 5 minutes on several orders. We'll set up a sub-vendor or outsource contracting if we need to, or change the machines at the work order level and don't touch the item master if it's a limited time frame. But we were looking for the same thing. We need to automate that process as if there was like a create form that comes up and asks you. The other question I had was, the first question I have, I guess, is when you have several customers that are in need of that same product, we saw in your case study that you only had one customer service rep with one sales order, but a lot of our product goes to maybe 50 different customers and 50 different orders at the same time. What happens in those cases?
Well, effectively in the supply schedule form, you would see all the sales orders that are actually pegged to this production order. So if you have 100 sales orders and one production order, or a couple of production orders that depend on that, you would still see that there.
Right, so somebody would have to go through and manually do every one of those?
That's why I'm saying right now, I mean, if it's kind of a mass criteria, it's something I would really expect to be added on the actions, because that's where you would kind of be able to consolidate that and see, okay, which actions actually apply to which sales orders or which customers actually. I mean, this is the instrument that master scheduling usually provides, that that you would actually see actions popping up for the sales orders, and then use that list page to actually start creating your cases from that.
Is that associated to Outlook as well? Does it send Outlook messages, or is it only within DAX it'll use, or Dynamics it'll use alert messages? Like, does the customer service rep have to go and look at the actual item or at the actual case?
Yeah, as I said, there's no configuration right now where you can connect actions to create automatic cases. That is not. There's no automatic configuration of that.
Okay, and my colleague just mentioned to me one other thing that we were going to ask was, when you receive work orders back from a vendor, and you receive that, it doesn't close the work order, I should say the transfer order. When you receive that transfer order, it doesn't automatically close the work orders on them. And then there's a bunch of transactions that have to be done manually. Is there any way to automate that in the process?
I'm not sure about the scenario. Maybe we should take that offline.
Okay.
What
Actually,
exactly
we're
the scenario is.
We'll do that. But
I mean,
I just didn't know if anybody else knew of a way to do that either. So.
Just one little remark. There's no link between the route and the BOM. And that's a problem, as if you have many vendors, that they could have different BOMs. So when you create a production order, you could have a lot of problem in waiting which is the right BOM and the route. And this is a link that must be absolutely created, I think.
yes, that is actually a good input. We've recently had the same feedback on the tech conference, and I mean, I want to make one comment on the way we actually have implemented this. So we have implemented the process change case with an attempt to actually do the minimal footprint, kind of provide the new scenarios or support the new scenarios without actually changing a lot of the architecture. Obviously, these kind of changing the versioning kind of from a BOM and route version to something that's more like a product version or an engineering version or an engineering engineering revision code, something like that. That is a little bit of a bigger thing. We're thinking about these processes, but so far it's not yet on the immediate action plan. Yes.
So I have a question on the Hydrunca board scheduling. If a cell is a single piece flow type cell, and maybe there's hundreds or even 1,000 single piece work orders or jobs hitting that cell, and maybe it's a minute cycle time type job.
Yeah.
Is that visualization a usable visualization?
There is a limitation to that. I mean, in a single piece flow with a couple of thousands per day, I would assume that you would primarily use the automatic scheduling, automatic planning, basically, which is basically kind of the first in, first out or the grouping. I mean, on the Kanban rules, you have the automatic planning settings that says where you can basically define the number of cards that have to be created before they actually get planned. And that is basically what the automatic planning does. On top of that, it would, of course, consider in finding the right dates through the due dates that actually come in. So in a scenario like that, I would probably expect that some kind of automatic planning would be done and not a manual planning. I mean, I just don't really see the point. Of course, you could argue that there's probably a lot of additional kind of methods of how this automatic planning could be done. And my answer to that would be, well, it's a fairly simple data model, and it's probably something that's pretty easy to extend this automatic planning if you have another grouping logic or another sequencing logic. The whole lean schedule basically is a pure sequence schedule. So there's not like, it doesn't really schedule time, it schedules sequence of jobs, and based on a calculated capacity load. So that is basically what it is.
Okay, thank you. And one other question then. For your color groupings on that Hydrunca board, what drives that grouping, and what flexibility do you have in attributes, for example?
Yeah.
To
so this is
create those
something that
groups?
is actually coming from what we call the lean schedule group. You can associate an item, the item level to the schedule group or the item work cell combination. So the same item could have a different color code in different resource, in different work cells. So if you have a more complex production flow with multi-activity, you would see that. So it's basically the schedule group that can be defined with or without work cell constraint, and you then basically assign the items. And the other important thing is that at that level, you also assign what we call the throughput ratio, because again, the architecture here is that I have a standard activity with a standard time and a standard cycle time. And the throughput ratio is what actually it controls the actual capacity consumption, and the actual cost calculation is actually used for both.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then we have to actually go back to the Where's the? I have it. Next steps, please provide us feedback on the session. The rest of the conference, we're also going to be at the manufacturing booth in the expo as often as we can, except of course the case at the times where we're actually on stage. We're going to be on stage again in half an hour here for the next presentation. So thank you for joining us today, and have a nice conference.